Any deletions from the agenda? Hearing none, do we have a motion to adopt the voting session agenda?
Motion, Venus.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposition? Abstentions? Hearing none, the agenda is adopted. Before we give public comment, I just want to welcome, we have Mr. Robertson, who just got into town this week. This is his first council meeting with us, so if we could all welcome Mr. Robertson. Thank you. Now we'll start public comment. We have Mr. Knapp.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Radel, and Vice Chair Lombardo, and the rest of council members. I appreciate everyone in attendance this evening. Also, welcome, Mr. Robertson, Ron Knapp from Nanticoke, PA. I just wanted to address the resolution regarding drop boxes. I stand here wanting to explain the necessity to have them removed for election integrity. I could give you every excuse that you've already heard. My opinion is, for the sovereignty of our republic, it is absolutely necessary that drop boxes are eliminated from the election process for integral purposes. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knapp. Mr. Newman?
Good evening, council, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Robertson, welcome to Luzerne County. It's a great place to be. I'm sure you're going to enjoy your tenure. Hopefully, we can get you around to see all the parts of Luzerne County, from Buck Township to Black Creek Township, from Wallopin, Nescopeck, all through Luzerne County. You'll enjoy it. My issue is number 4 and then number 7. I see where we're going to rezone 12.9 acres of mining land in Newport Township, which I have no problem with. We're not doing a whole lot of mining anymore, but we're going to put a 2-family residence district zone. Where in Newport Township are we going to do this? Can anybody answer that? Where in Luzerne County, in Newport Township? All right, so y'all did your homework.
West Railroad Street.
Where?
West Railroad.
West Railroad Street, and that's in Glen Line. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Greg. I have no problem with it. Just wondered where it was, and the Glen Line section of Newport Township is an area that could use something like that. Next item is number 7, and here we go again. Drop boxes. The law doesn't say you have to have drop boxes. You don't have to. And, you know, we have them probably because somebody that doesn't understand what the U.S. Postal Service does with their lock boxes. Okay? And I can assure everybody in this room, from my experience with 33 years in the U.S. Postal Service in almost every major city, every post office lockbox, drop box as we're called, when that's opened by a letter carrier, that letter carrier scans the code inside that box after they collect it, locks it up, and goes back to their post office. That scanner is then dumped into the system, and it verifies that the letter carrier has collected every box on his or her route. So anybody that says they don't get collected, that they're not safe, that they're unsecure, just doesn't know what they're talking about. From my experience, I can tell you they are safe, secure,
Thank you.
and serve the purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. Peter, are you back there? I'm getting messages on the Zoom. I'm getting messages on the Zoom that the public cannot speak for public comment.
I unmuted once the in-person are done.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Mr. Raybo?
Good evening, members of council. Welcome, Mr. Robertson, to Luzerne County. I hope your tenure will be a great one here, and we can move the county forward together. With respect to item number 5, I just want to know if the lease agreement would include any storage, like if a county detective needed to keep the vehicle in storage for an investigative purpose, and would it be kept in a Luzerne County property or at a municipal property, or if there would need to be like lease space from a county-owned property for those vehicles that are impounded. That would be my question there. Also for number 7, as Councilman Thornton said last meeting, and I agree with him on what, how it transposed, the whole Dropbox issue transpired in terms of September of 2020, there was a lawsuit brought forward by the state Democrat Party and the state Senate Democrats in terms of needing the drop boxes because there was an emergency declaration in place and the health and safety of the voter was at risk. So therefore, the drop boxes needed to be allowed for the people, the voters, to be able to vote and not have come down with COVID or be hospitalized because they were fearful of getting infected. So now we have a situation where the life and the health and safety of the voter is not at risk, and there's no emergency declaration in place. So therefore, the ruling from September of 2020 is a moot point. It's not valid. It's just there because of an unelected, appointed bureaucrat, Kathy Buckfar, who only served as a poll worker in one election, who was acting DOS secretary, who took it upon herself to say that the drop boxes needed to be put in place. And it was a directive on her part. It wasn't even a directive on the governor's part. So how is it able to be enforced? I say it's not. This is just a bureaucratic directive that's unenforceable. So I agree with Mr. Thornton's resolution. I stand with it. And I would go as far to say that the 67 counties in CCAP should challenge it at the Supreme Court level, state Supreme Court level, or even go to the US Supreme Court. File certiorari, take it to the US Supreme Court, see what they have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Raybo. Mr. McCabe?
Welcome aboard, Mr. Robinson, fellow officer in the service which I serve. My concern is number 7. I live in the Exeter borough. There's 4 wards. We used to have 4 wards in Exeter. We're down to 1. And there's a major problem at the place of ballots, because you have 8,000 to 10,000 people in Exeter, and senior citizens, they can't get out. And that's why I think one reason they started the ballot boxes, because, for senior citizens that can't walk, and that people at these tables should understand that we have a lot of senior citizens in Luzerne County, and start considering the seniors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCabe. I have a slip for an Owen Lavery, but it's not marked agenda or non-agenda.
As I wasn't aware of what that referred to.
Sure, is it regarding a matter that's on our agenda
Yes.
tonight? Then you could speak now then.
Very brief, because the gentleman who preceded me, my being 73, my wife being 73, we find the drop boxes to be very convenient. I'm trying to get my mind around the fact that this is an issue. Apparently, there's been a big problem in Luzerne County with the drop boxes. Is there someone who could explain to me what that problem was in the past elections? Or is it just fear?
Well, I think it's both.
Wait, Mr. Lavery, you could have your 3 minutes and then we'll answer questions. So if there's anything else
okay.
you want to say,
Oh,
just-
okay.
we don't want to
I
pass your
understand
3
that.
minutes off to
I'm
council members.
Not familiar with the format. I'm
Sure.
sorry. Well, the bottom line for me is if you're trying to solve a problem that does not exist and has not existed the past 2 times that it's been used, or even more for that matter, I just don't see the purpose of it. And having Luzerne County be out there as trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist would qualify us as, what's the phrase recently used? Detached from reality. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Liscavige, did you want to briefly respond? I just didn't want to lose
Well,
3
just going
minutes.
back to your question, I think people are afraid because there was people caught, even in Luzerne County, put more than one ballot, which is illegal. Okay, and throughout the country, I encourage everybody who has a question about drop boxes to watch 2,000 Mules. It is not a made-up movie. What?
That's just been disproved yesterday.
Not really. Everybody has a cell phone, okay? And it has an MSN number in it. So what happens is they track them by their cell phone, right down to the minute. And then what they did was they rented space off the satellite and actually put the footage of video to it. So, and the other part of it too is how do you explain that Pennsylvania sent out 2 million ballots and got returned 2.5 million? That's a tough one too.
You've been listening to a former president.
No.
Thank
I
you.
read,
Very
I
good.
learn, but that's okay.
Thank you. I have no other slips. We'll open it up to the public who didn't have a slip, but I have 2 to read that were sent via email. The first one, dear council members, my name is Allison Piot. I am writing from Lake Township. I'm writing to discuss the proposed resolution against no excuse mail-in voting and getting rid of drop boxes. I'm very concerned the council has come up with this resolution. The resolution says to all our voters, especially disabled persons and senior citizens, that instead of making sure all members of our community have safe, equal, limitation-free access to exercise their right to vote, no matter their advanced age, income status, race, color, creed, disability, or sexual orientation, the council appears to be more concerned about non-existent voter fraud. No excuse mail-in voting and drop boxes are ways the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania have allowed more people to legally exercise their right to vote, including those who have transit issues, job commitments, childcare needs, most especially seniors and people with disabilities. I'm so passionate about this issue because I'm a person with disabilities. My disabilities are based in my immune system and musculoskeletal system, so they aren't always seen to the outside viewer. They are hidden disabilities. As a person with disabilities, I can get an absentee ballot and declare I have a disability each time, but I need to include my physician information. To get a permanent absentee ballot, it would require my physician to sign off. As many of you know, if you've had forms taken to a doctor before, fees are charged for forms, physician signatures. No excuse mail-in ballots give a person like me a chance to not have to disclose the reason I can't stand in a line for a long time, or I'm at risk to get extremely sick around groups of people because I recently had an infusion that has killed off all my B cells. I should not have to pay an additional fee due to my medical conditions to send in a physician approval to have permanent absentee ballot. No excuse mail-in voting makes it a relief to not think about being unwell when I'm exercising my right to vote. I can take my time at home if I'm having a bad day with hand mobility to fill out my ballot and drop it in a drop box at my convenience before election day. I'm maintaining my health and wellness and exercising my right to vote lawfully. Since I must follow the directions whether I use a drop box or the mail and have my signature match my signature on file, there's no way myself or any other disabled person can commit voter fraud. If the council is looking for ways to improve voting in the Commonwealth with a resolution, perhaps a resolution encouraging early voting like many other states do to cut down on lines so people can go to polling places when there are limitations with just one day of polls open. Perhaps a resolution urging the Commonwealth to make Election Day a holiday, perhaps making sure eligible voters are not purged from voting rolls or enacting automatic voter registration. These things would help to enfranchise more legal voters in our great county and Commonwealth, not seek to limit our fellow Americans from voting. In summary, creating a partisan resolution under the guise of election security does not represent this citizen of Luzerne County. I would urge the council to not pass the resolution since coming out and saving you oppose no excuse mail-in voting and the elimination of drop boxes is an ableist take and will limit the safe and secure voting options for myself and many other constituents. Sincerely, Allison Pratt, MA. Another one from Ryan Stoa, Dallas Township. To the members of Luzerne County Council, I simply urge you to vote no on this measure and to get back to business. I personally believe that type of action should not be undertaken unless it arises as a request from and through our election boards or as a direct result of hard evidence of issues, lest this board veers into the realm of acting on political interests and pundits versus the interests of our citizens. As the party of smaller government, how much of my tax dollars have been taken up with this item so far, none of which will have meaningful effect, as the county must follow the guidance from the state. Please just focus on the real county issues and stay out of this political noise. I know it isn't as flashy for the papers, but there's real work to be done here. Thank you, Ryan. Those were the two that I had that were asked to be read. Do we have any other members of the public that wish to speak on agenda items only?
Yes, this is Claudia Glennon, Salem Township. I too would like to exercise my disapproval on item 7, the resolution to revise PA election laws. The courts have confirmed that no fraudulent election issues occurred that would have affected the outcome of the 2020 election. And the rest of this is just noise being elevated by former President Trump. If anybody is watching the January 6th hearings, even former Attorney General William Barr laughed out loud at the ridiculousness of 2,000 mules. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public?
Yeah, I would
Brenda?
like to speak as well. Sorry.
Mr. Schaefer, where are you from?
I'm from Wilkes-Barre.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm Mark Schaefer from Wilkes-Barre. I just would also like to say that I hope council votes against the resolution against drop boxes. It is funny to me that we talk about whether our elections were stolen or not, but the council members who raise these concerns have absolutely no concern that their election was legitimate. It's kind of funny that you're so convinced that a different election was stolen, but yours was 100% legitimate. There's no evidence that this type of fraud has ever happened before. And it's really just purely partisan, an attempt to excuse a loss and being a sore loser. As other people have said, these are really important for people with disabilities, elderly people. I live in Wilkes-Barre and multiple polling places have closed. So people who used to have to just walk across the street to go vote now have to go like a 5-minute drive, have to go all the way from up on the hill to down into downtown Wilkes-Barre. And if they're an elderly person who doesn't have a car, that's incredibly difficult. So it's much easier for them to just be able to get a no excuse ballot, drop it off at a drop box or mail it in. And these types of reforms really just make it harder for people to vote without any type of benefit. And as others can say, 2,000 meals is not something I would take seriously as evidence, mainly because the guy who made it has been convicted of election fraud before. So I don't think he's exactly the person to take seriously on election fraud issues.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. Any other members of the public? On agenda items only.
Yes, Ms. Radel.
Controller Griffith, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, and I would also like to weigh in on item number 7 on the drop boxes, but I would like the solicitor to take a look at the sunshine law in section 710.1C, which says the public has a right to comment during the entire meeting. So the ability for us to be muting the room during the meeting is not conducive to that law. So take a look at that at some point. My comment on number 7 is that it's not about stealing the election. I think we're mixing kind of apples and oranges here on this whole issue. The ability of the drop boxes has nothing at all to do with stealing the election. It has everything to do with following the election statute that says drop boxes will be at the Bureau of Elections office only. And as Mr. Rabo said, that they put that special provision in there for drop boxes because of the COVID. And I understand it's convenient for some people to go to a drop box and put their ballot in there. But the thing that's puzzling to me is if you can get in your car to drive to a drop box, why could you just not get in the car to go vote on the day of election? And I understand for some people it's convenient, but it's really, we need to get away from this mindset that we're worried about drop boxes because people steal the election. It's about the ability for people to stuff the ballot box. Clearly, it's also about the ability for people to put more than their own ballot in the box, which is clearly a violation of the law. And so I think that's the whole concern about drop boxes is they're not secure that we could watch the drop box. They're not secure so we can see that people are following the statute properly. It's not about stealing the election. I think that was a Trumpism, for lack of a word. That was a Trumpism, and that's where that all came from. But that's not the whole reason for the drop box elimination. It's about being consistent and following the law and doing what we're supposed to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Griffith. Any other members of the public on agenda items only? Hearing none, moving on. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of the May
Motion.
24th? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Minutes are approved. Agenda item number 1, motion to adopt resolution approving the settlement of pending litigation in the matter of Nancy Hunter v. Luzerne County. Do we have a motion?
So moved, Terry.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, Ms. Lawrence.
Mr. Venus?
Yes.
Mr. LaScavitch?
Yes.
Mr. Lombardo?
Yes.
Ms. McDermott? Yes. Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Mr. Thornton?
Yes.
Mr. Urban?
Yes.
Mr. Willoughby?
Yes.
Ms. Radel?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Motion passes. Number 2, motion to adopt resolution approving the settlement of pending litigation in the matter of Lori Hughes v. Luzerne County and Wilkes-Barre City. Do you have a motion?
So. Second, Perry.
We have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call?
Mr. LaScavitch?
Yes.
Mr. Lombardo?
Yes.
Ms. McDermott?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Mr. Thornton?
Yes.
Mr. Urban?
No.
Mr. Willoughby?
Yes.
Mr. Venus?
Yes.
Ms. Radel?
Yes.
9-1.
9-1, motion passes. Number 3, motion to adopt resolution designating the county manager, director of operations, and/or the county engineers authorized signatory for execution of agreements, documents, notices, required exhibits, and management of projects through the DOT system.
Motion. Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Lombardo?
Yes.
Ms. McDermott?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Mr. Thornton?
Yes.
Mr. Urban?
Yes.
Mr. Willoughby?
Yes.
Mr. Venus?
Yes.
Mr. LaScavitch?
Yes.
Ms. Radel?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Motion passes. Number 4, this is just a motion to introduce, so it's introducing the ordinance amending the Luzerne County zoning map to rezone 3 parcels of property totaling 12.95 acres in Newport Township.
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. McDermott?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Mr. Thornton?
Yes.
Mr. Urban?
Yes.
Mr. Willoughby?
Yes.
Mr. Venus?
Yes.
Mr. LaScavitch?
Yes.
Mr. Lombardo?
Yes.
Ms. Radel?
Yes. Motion passes. Number 5, motion to adopt resolution authorizing the county manager to execute lease documents for district attorney auto theft task force vehicle.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mr. Lombardo, second by Thornton. Roll call?
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Mr. Thornton?
Yes.
Mr. Urban?
Yes.
Mr. Willoughby?
Yes.
Mr. Venus?
Yes.
Mr. LaScavitch?
Yes.
Mr. Lombardo?
Yes.
Ms. McDermott?
Yes.
Ms. Radel?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Number 6, motion to adopt resolution to adopt proposed amendment to the Articles of Incorporation for Luzerne County Transportation Authority to increase its term of existence to a date not exceeding 50 years from the date of approval of the Articles of Amendment and to take any and all other related actions hereto.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call?
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Mr. Thornton?
Yes.
Mr. Urban?
Yes.
Mr. Willoughby?
Yes.
Mr. Venus?
Yes.
Mr. LaScavitch?
Yes.
Mr. Lombardo?
Yes.
Ms. McDermott?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
Ms. Radel?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Motion passes. Number 7, motion to adopt resolution urging the Pennsylvania State Legislature to revise Pennsylvania election laws, thereby disallowing the continued use of no excuse mail-in and drop box voting and further instituting measures to restore election integrity.
Second with Scavenge.
On the question,
Go ahead, Mr. McGinley.
okay, on the question, and we've heard a lot of commentary tonight from several sources, people who go to the podium, some people who emailed in. I think that this is a very critical element of our elections. We should be striving, I think, to increase participation in elections. And I think what we propose here tonight will limit that participation, which I don't think is a good thing for our county or for anyone who votes across the country or Commonwealth. In the mail-in ballots, we had 64,000 people who voted this past election, not the special election, but the past election. Of that 64,000, 18,000 little bit more, were mail-in ballots. So that's 30% of that 64,000. So if you eliminate mail-in ballots, you have a potential to eliminate 30% of your vote, which is significant. I also think with the drop boxes, that's not something that we did. It's something that came down to us and the election board made a decision. I think if we want to go to the election board, offer our thoughts on that, that would be positive. And I think the election board will move forward and make a decision. For us to go ahead and pass this resolution, I think is a negative for our elections. It's a negative for our participation. And I really think that's something we should think about prior to actually making that vote.
Thank you, Mr.
I have a
McGinley.
question.
Mr. Walvish.
Absentee ballots were first started in 1864 by Republican President Abraham Lincoln because of the war, so that way soldiers could vote in the election. After the war, the absentee ballots were taken away because the problem never existed. It was gone. It was a moot point. So now FDR brought it back. I believe it was early 1930s. He brought it back for people who couldn't make it to the polls because of work, because people were driving around the country, people were transported, they're moving around. So, okay, understandable, absence from your polling place, which is, of course, anybody who can't be home. So absentee ballots since then were in place. People with disabilities, it was in place then. People who could not make it to the polls, you have reason, it's a verified reason. Why not? And also later on, I believe it was 1940s, 1950s, there's also a religious exemption. So people that maybe had a Sabbath or they had something that may have fallen on election day, it was for religious reasons, they could vote by absentee. So here we are today. COVID emergency? Okay, at the time I can understand, no excuse, mail-in ballot, so people can go and vote, understandable. The health emergency is over. We're no longer at that point. Drop boxes. We don't need drop boxes. Drop them off at the polling, at the US Postal Service. Any postal service would take them, drop them in the mailbox, it's fine. My grandparents, my grandfather had multiple sclerosis. He voted way before no excuse mail-in ballot by absentee ballot. If you want to vote, you can vote. There's reasons for you to vote absentee, which I am completely fine with. But no excuse to dropping them in ballot boxes that are not monitored. There's no security at those boxes. Again, we had somebody dropping off four ballots that were not even their own, right in the election bureau. We need integrity. We need election integrity. It's very important. It's crucial. If you want to vote, you will make the effort to vote. You'll go to your polling place or you'll do an absentee ballot. And I think those are the only two valid ways to vote. Thanks.
Mr. Horton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I suggested this resolution, I brought it before. I want to remind everybody, the members of the public, that this is not county council changing the laws for or against drop boxes or no excuse mail-in ballots. We're not doing that here tonight. The only purpose of this resolution is to encourage our state legislators to look at those two very serious items with our future elections. I want to reassure the public that I had no thoughts. I'm not doing this because I'm afraid someone's stealing elections. That was not the issue at all. I concur with Controller Griffin on that. But we do know, because I've attended, I don't know how many members of the public who spoke tonight attended the election board meetings as I did in recent months. There was more than one. There were several occasions where people just happened to be spotted bringing stacks of ballots in to drop them in the box. Now, the probability of finding that or witnessing that was remote. Happened one day by our election director. He happened to be walking through the lobby and spotted a woman doing that. But there's 4 other drop boxes around the county. There's nobody watching them. I don't care if you had around-the-clock video surveillance. Who's going to watch thousands of hours of videotape hoping to see someone do that? Nobody watches videotapes. So we're not doing this. First of all, we're not doing it at all. We can't change the election laws. That's up to the state. Secondly, there is no law on the books currently authorizing drop box voting. There is none. Okay. Third, I want to reiterate what Mr. Logan said. Our voting system has worked very well for 150 years. I want to take you back real briefly to the 1800s. Anybody watch Little House on the Prairie like I did all my life, because I'm corny like that. People had to load up their buckboard or their wagon and sometimes drive overnight or for 2 days to go and vote. And they did. But here we are, the last 30 years, every town has their own voting place. For most towns, it's right down the street or a couple of blocks away. Every firehouse, church, hall, fraternal organization. It's very easy to vote. We allowed people to absentee send in a ballot through the mail for many decades, like Mr. Wilovich said. That works great. I would never, ever want to get rid of that. But it puts a little more validity behind that ballot because there has to be an excuse attached. This no excuse mail-in ballot system is full of fraud. And we witnessed it here in the county. I'm not suggesting this resolution because of 2,000 mules. You never heard those words come out of my mouth. It's because of what happened here in Luzerne County. There were multiple instances that we caught. Imagine the ones we didn't catch because there's nobody around watching them. And they're boom, once they're dropped, they're in there. So nobody could say, oh, it's absolutely without fraud. How could anybody say that? The notion that 100% of our public is sincere and honest as long as the day is, that's ridiculous. I mean, there are some unfortunately unscrupulous people in society on both sides of the aisle that would take advantage of something like that. And again, this is just a resolution urging our legislators to move. We're not changing anything here at county council. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Thorne. Mr. Lombardo?
Just to add on to that, and to add on to what Controller Griffith said about, people following the statute. Our own governor admitted to committing voter fraud by having his wife drop off his mail-in ballot. So, I mean, it's clearly there's an issue with understanding what the law is. Act 77 is just a bad law, and it needs to be altered seriously, and that's why I support this.
Can I say one thing quickly?
Yeah.
I am going to support this resolution, but I'd be remiss if I didn't just say how I'm feeling about it. So I do think that we have an issue. I agree with most people here that we have an issue with drop boxes in the county. And I do think that the letter to our legislature that we're passing tonight should definitely express that. But I don't like resolutions or legislation or anything that we vote on that has no teeth, that's purely meant to be political. I agree the drop boxes are an issue. I think our election board needs to handle that. I'm fine with sending that. The no excuse mail-in balloting, the mail-in ballots, I'm kind of okay with. The drop boxes, not so much. But I said this, there were other things brought up in the past since I've been elected to county council that are just purely political. And the way that this was presented at the work session at our last meeting was Mr. Thornton stated that he wanted to see, and the public has a right to see where council members' opinions lie on election integrity. And I don't think that's the case. That I'm going to support this, but I don't think that this is a testament to whether or not anybody supports election integrity. And I do think it is a political piece of legislation. Go ahead, Mr. Muscavich.
So in 2020, I'd just like to say that I received 2 sets of mail-in ballots, of which I requested 0. So there's 8 ballots. I think we were all brought up to speed that you could take a ballot in Luzerne County and pass that same ballot through a machine. It will count it once, twice, 5 times. So then if I were to take those ballots and put them into a drop box, that would have been 8 votes for one person. That's the issue I have with that process.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. Could we have a roll call on this, Ms. Lawrence?
Mr. Thornton?
Yes.
Mr. Urban?
Yes.
Mr. Wilovich?
Yes.
Mr. Venus?
Yes.
Mr. Liscavige?
Yes.
Mr. Lombardo?
Yes.
Ms. McDermott?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
No.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Ms. Radel?
Yes.
9-1.
9-1, motion passes. Number 8, nominations and appointments to Luzerne County Council. Do I have a motion to open nominations?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions, opposed. Nominations are open.
Make a motion to nominate David Johnson.
I'll second it.
Motion to nominate Matt Mitchell.
Second.
Motion to close nominations.
Motion. Close nomination.
Close, second. Mr. Chairman. All in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions, opposed, nominations are closed. If we could do a roll call and if each council member can state their nominee.
Mr. Urban,
Mr. Trump.
Mr. Wilovich,
Mr. Mitchell.
Mr. Venus,
Mr. Mitchell.
Mr. Liscavige,
Mr. Mitchell.
Mr. Lombardo,
Mr. Mitchell,
Ms. McDermott,
Mr. Mitchell?
Mr. McGinley,
Mr. Mitchell.
Mr. Perry,
Mr. Mitchell.
Mr. Thornton,
Mr. Mitchell.
Ms. Radel.
Mr. Mitchell? 9-1 for Mr. Mitchell. Could we do a roll call on the resolution for Mr. Person for the resolution?
Motion for the resolution.
second.
Mr. Wilovich,
Yes.
Mr. Venus,
Yes.
Mr. Liscavige,
Yes.
Mr. Lombardo,
Yes.
Ms. McDermott,
Yes.
Mr. McGinley,
Yes.
Mr. Perry,
Yes.
Mr. Thornton,
Yes.
Mr. Urban,
Yes.
Ms. Radel.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Unanimous congratulations to Mr. Mitchell, our next council member. Before the next meeting, he'll have to get sworn in. You can work with Ms. Lawrence to do that, but we're happy to have you. Public comment on non-agenda items. Ms. Hartman?
First of all, can Mr. Mitchell raise their hand so I know who Mr. Mitchell is, because I don't know who Mr. Mitchell
I
is
didn't,
here.
I didn't see him.
He's not here. So, but we do have 6 or 7 of the people that were interviewed here tonight, correct? Okay, I just wanted to make that known. My name is Elizabeth Hartman. I'm from Hanover Township. Many of you that have been on council for a long time know me. I fight family court. I fight children and youth. I've been fighting for years since Kids for Cash. Luzerne County is one of the most corrupt counties in Pennsylvania. So I welcome you to Luzerne County. You have your hands full, Mr. Robinson. I don't know why they moved your office down to Penn Place, but prior to now, the county manager's office with Mr. Pedri was in this building in the basement. When Ramilda took over, they moved her to Penn Plaza. I don't know who made that decision, but I think you as the county manager should have the right to say where your office is. Not anybody else in here saying where you belong. You have the right as the manager of this county to say where you want to be and where you want to hang out. I think they don't want the hawk watching the snake pit, okay? So they're sending you down to Penn Plaza, so you're not seeing what's here. Now, I'm starting a group of court watchers. I started today. I sat in courtroom number 1 and I sat in courtroom number 2 from 9:30 this morning. I had someone else with me till noonish, 1 o'clock. Judge Bo was on the bench from 9:30 to 12 o'clock for 45 minutes total. 45 minutes. Come out, here's 3 cases, back in 98, sitting here wasting their time. Yep, we're on payroll. We're getting paid. Sit here, do nothing. He goes in his chambers, comes back out. Here's 8 more cases. Quick, guilty, plea, whatever, goes back in. My point of being here tonight, I'm now seeing my grandchildren. Okay, we have Judge Salavantis, and God bless her that she's on the straight and narrow right now, okay? And she's watching what's going on. She said she's not going to give my case up. She's going to handle it. So we're going to see what she does. I've had video phone calls with my grandchildren for the last 2 months. I have supervised visits, and so does my son with my grandchildren for the last month. Do you know what I pay a supervisor to watch me with my grandchildren? I worked for the census last year. I am cleared by the county to carry a gun, and I'm cleared by the state to be a patient advocate for medical marijuana people. I have to pay a supervisor per a court order $45 an hour to go eat in a restaurant with me and my grandchildren. $45 an hour.
Thank you, Ms. Hartman. Ms. Song? Chambertown?
Wow, what a presentation to follow. I'm Eileen Song, and I'm here on behalf of Luzerne County Children and Youth. And I want to come here to share some concerns we have. And I'm here with 3 of my fellow board members. We want to express to you the urgency and the desperation that we're feeling as board members as we watch the people at the agency trying to do their jobs. There's so many people eager to throw stones at the agency. And you know what? Right now, we have 55 positions open out of 108. And I'm getting a little emotional after hearing somebody attack the agency because they work so hard to protect our children. And I'm so happy that Mr. Robertson is here and look forward to you supporting the agency. They have a contract proposal that they've put together with the Teamsters Union. I really want to beg you to take deep consideration because we cannot protect the children and do the jobs when we are so short-staffed. I've been on the board for several years, and every meeting that I've attended, one of the most urgent issues is how many openings we have. We need people, and we have to give them competitive salaries. We need to raise wages because we cannot recruit and retain talented people to do this difficult job. And it is a very, very challenging, difficult job, constantly under attack. My understanding is the state is on board. They pay 80%. Our county pays 20%. If we really care about children, I hope you will really understand how urgent and desperate the situation is. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Song. Mr. Rabel?
Could I add to that? We would like to be able to make a presentation in person to council at a different time and talk about some of the issues that are plaguing children in need.
Yes,
We are determined that it's working with you, that it has to improve.
I did speak with Ms. Hill about scheduling a presentation. What's your name?
Kathleen McCarthy. And I'm on the board for children in need.
Thank you, Ms. McCarthy.
Madam Chair, first of all, I'd like to thank council for their vote on number 7 for the urging the legislators. Just so you know, I was like Councilman Thornton, one of the people that attended election board meetings. And I never brought up 2,000 mules either, but I did bring up instances where there were ballot fraud, such as our sister county, Lehigh County, where the district attorney of Lehigh County said, over the time that drop boxes were in place, a total of 7,196 ballots were deposited and counted. He said at least 288 persons deposited more than one ballot in various drop boxes. And this happened before our primary, before the primary season. So for anybody to say it doesn't happen around in our state is lying through their teeth or ignorant. I'll leave it to them to disclose which one it is. And as far as they brought up convenience, okay, but the state Supreme Court ruling in September of 2020 didn't mention convenience. It mentioned health emergency, declaration, and health and safety of the voter. So that being said, you might want to go to your state legislators and then say, well, pass the legislation, call the roll, call the vote. Okay, so that's all I have to say about that. Now, as far as the work session goes, for the ARP projects, I did give paperwork to all of council about Hazleton's ARPA money, what was spent. So they made requests, and I was told at a Hazleton City meeting last week that my vote or my voice doesn't matter, and that I just wanted to know how much they spent. But I guess the council president doesn't feel that anybody's, any citizen's voice matters, because you guys should just give the money and we should all shut up. I disagree with that sentiment. I think that the citizens have a right to know what's being spent on their behalf and what taxpayer money is being requested of the county. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Okay. Mr. Newman?
Several meetings ago, I brought up the situation of personnel for children and youth. I made the recommendation that with some 9 graduating universities in the local area, and I'll spell them out: Wilkes, King's, Misericordia, University of Scranton, Marywood, Keystone, and 3 Penn State campuses, Wilkes-Barre, Hazleton, and Scranton. 9 universities to recruit from. People graduate from these looking for jobs, and they graduate in that field. That field. Why wasn't somebody recruiting? Why didn't you go to the job fairs? Why not get a booth at the job fairs and recruit people? It isn't hard, folks, but you have to do it. You just can't talk about it. You just can't say, oh, yeah, we're going to do that. No, that doesn't work.
Mr. Newman, I think they did do that.
Beg
I
your pardon?
think they did do that.
They did?
Absolutely.
And did you get anybody? No, not at all.
When
Okay,
we do,
well.
the tuition rate is great because the salaries are so low.
Well, maybe that's an answer too. All right, let me get on that soapbox. Raise the damn salaries.
Please.
Raise the salary. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. Any other members of the public?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Knapp?
You okay?
Sure.
Again, my name is Ronald Knapp. In 2021, I ran for Luzerne County Council. I am really disappointed in all council members with your decision this evening. I am speaking for 8,546 voters. Mr. Thornton, you brought the resolution to the attention of council about drop boxes and about the necessity for election integrity. You just blew holes in your whole cause. You didn't listen to the voters. Now, you could say, I didn't make it to the general election that year. The fact of the matter is, I came in with 250 some votes higher than Mr. Venus here, Councilman Venus. I'm not bent out of shape because remember, it's a year and a half from now, another election takes place. If I didn't stand here right now and speak up for my voters, 8,546 voters, really, they'd have no cause to vote for me again. My position is this: you made the wrong decision. I'm a conservative person with a conservative platform, and have always voiced my opinion for conservative values. This has to be addressed. This had to be said. And on to the next election. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Knapp. And Mrs. Hartman?
I just have a question, Madam Chair. Why was banter allowed to occur between the public here and the podium? Why wasn't that shut down like it would have been shut down had we had the old chair up there? Like you couldn't banter back and forth between audience and somebody speaking at the podium. That should have been shut down immediately.
Thanks, Ms. Hartman. So, yeah, you already did have your 3 minutes. I will address it though. Mr. Liscavige just asked to briefly address the question. I let him when banter started. We stopped that immediately. So there is no banter, but council members do have a right to answer questions if they wish to as we go along. Thank you. Any other members of the public?
Yeah, one question. I know there's council members in this town that serve their local municipalities. Like I said, I'm in Exeter since 1978. And there was 4 wards in Exeter. We're down to 1 ward for elections now. There's other towns in the area. Whoever created this problem to force everybody to go into 1 polling place? Could anybody answer that question? I know there's people in this room that went through the same thing, yet it's a mess when you get 8 to 10,000 people in Exeter trying to jam in St. Anthony's Church Hall. When you had St. Anthony's, you had St. Cecilia's, you had a little place up in the 4th Ward, and there was another one down in the 3rd Ward. But now there's other towns in the area. There's councilmen in this town now, or firemen and that. Could you tell me whatever happened? Who made the change to create a problem with the
Mr. McCabe,
elections?
I'm not a fireman.
No, but
Mr. McCabe.
there is councilmen in this room.
I could maybe answer that, but I
Yeah.
think that a lot of it has to do with lack of desire to be a poll worker. I mean, there's a lot of times when we have difficulty finding poll workers in even my own polling place.
No, that's my main concern for seniors is trying to get into an area where it's jammed and, but I can't
Yeah,
see, you know.
Mr. McCabe, you can voice your concerns to the election board. They might be able to help you more as they go
You
over the
can't get
polls.
an answer out. I called them numerous times and,
The election board.
well,
has
now
to
they
be-
answer, but
Yeah, I think you're referring to the election bureau, but.
there's
the
a guy I
election
know
board-
that's gonna answer a call when you call the county manager and their office don't give you an answer back.
Thank you, Mr. McCabe.
Well, I'm just saying, nobody can answer this question. It's a serious question, you know?
Thank
And
you,
this
Mr. McCabe.
councilman in there right
Any other
now.
members of the public that wish to speak who have not already?
Yes.
Hearing none, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Yes, it's Walter Griffith. Hello.
Sorry, I hear
How are
you.
you?
Sorry.
Okay,
Go ahead, Mr.
all right, sorry, I didn't want to prolong the meeting any longer, but I wanted to take a moment to, first of all, I want to thank Mr. Sweats for stepping up and doing the job of the acting county manager for the past, I guess it was about 2-3 weeks that we had the luxury of having Brian as our county manager. You know, it's obviously a difficult time for Mr. Sweats. We're in the middle of an audit. He's in the middle of running budget and finance. We have a lot of things on his plate, yet he stepped up for the good of the county to become the acting county manager at a time when we had no one. So as a county controller, I want to thank him for that. We had a acting county manager who pledged that she was all about the county and she always wanted to do what was right for the people, yet she left us hanging at the most critical time when we're bringing in a new manager. So I want to thank Brian publicly for his efforts in helping the county at the time. I also want to welcome Mr. Robertson to the helm, to the King's chair. I certainly look forward to the weeks ahead and getting an opportunity to meet with him. I wish him well in his days ahead. And if there's anything the controller's office could do to help, I'm more than happy to have my office available to him. I also want to thank and welcome aboard Matt Mitchell to the council. I think he's going to be a welcome addition to council and I wish him well in his endeavors. My last point to the Office of Law is under section 710.1. It says public participation under Sunshine Law. Section C says objection. Any person has the right to raise an objection at any time to a perceived violation of this chapter at any meeting of the board or council of a political subdivision or an authority created by a political subdivision. The IT department should not be muting the public from any participation. If public gets out of hand, we have the right as council. You probably could certainly ask them to leave the room or mute them, as Mr. McGinley used to do, to say, mute your mic, you're interfering, but we do not have the ability as a body to sequester the public from jumping in if they feel an objection has happened. So I want the Office of Law to look at that and possibly guide the council accordingly. And lastly, again, the council needs to put somebody on the Wyoming Valley Airport Board. The advisory board has not been functioning for the last couple of years, and we have absolutely no oversight at the Wyoming Valley Airport for the FBO. So I would appreciate council taking a look at that, and certainly I anticipate their participation. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Controller Griffith. Mr. Urban?
As the sort of resident doctor of all details here, everything we passed tonight did not have Mr. Robertson's name on here as county manager. And we still have Brian Sweats and Ramilda's name on a lot of these documents. We did not vote to amend any of the documents to change the names of the signatures on any of the contracts or any of the legislation. So how do we want to handle that, Mr. Steve?
Contract we were just looking at for the lease, I think they left that open because there was some lag time having those documents redone. So they would have filled them by hand. the resolutions were done and the agenda meetings were done while still the acting town manager. Passed the resolutions, so now that Mr. Robertson is here, he would be the county manager, we'd be able to sign it.
I mean, but typically we amend before we go ahead and just sign off on things. You know, that's usually proper rules and protocol. You know, so.
Title on all the county manager. Mr. Horton.
Would it suffice if someone from the body here made a motion to substitute, as far as any legislation that was passed tonight, substitute Mr. Robertson's name, wherever Mr. Sweat's name appeared in the legislature?
Could we just say wherever county manager appears on them?
Well, there's things that are typed in by, like, police or the vehicle. I mean, it has for local names typed in the car code. So, you know, you have to go through the entire document, filter out her name, and place it in every section.
Well, we made a motion to do that.
Attorney Skeen, can we do that?
Yeah, I think that's old. There's a new lease that has all blanks in it and nobody's.
Okay, so my problem then is like, once again, you're bringing up a document that's not clean. And I had this issue with the former department head at one point in time. They said, well, the final copy is sitting on my desk. And when that stuff comes to council, it needs to be the final copy. You know what I'm saying?
I understand. That
Because what you're doing is basically, how do we know that this document goes back to Never Never Land and comes back with different changes that we did not adopt based on the verbiage that we had here tonight? I'm gonna take this back at home and file this, but you go back and amend it, and now it's gonna be different than what we as a body passed in totality.
Really quickly, if you don't mind, Miss Lawrence just expressed that these documents are all prepared and need to be posted on Friday. And while we were really crossing our fingers that Mr. Robertson got here, he was not here at the time these were drafted, and they have to be posted, you know, on Friday. So she did draft them then. So, I mean, to ask Miss Lawrence to go back and edit them all, you know, once he arrived on Monday, I did not do that. So whether we think that.
I don't think it's Lawrence's job.
Second, Mr. Thornton's motion.
Okay, Mr. Thornton made the motion to substitute Mr. Robertson's name wherever Ms. Crocomo or Mr. Sweats is named in the county manager capacity.
Second.
Mr. McGinley made the second.
Can we make motions to have a public comment?
Yes, you can. You're allowed to have public comment. Yes, you can.
I second the motion to allow public comment, not substituting Mr. Robertson's name everywhere.
You made the initial motion.
First.
Yeah.
Okay, second, Mr. McGinn.
Second, Mr. McGinley. And while we have a first and a second, are there any members of the public who would like to comment before we vote? Hearing none, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Venus,
Yes.
Mr. LaScavitch,
Yes.
Mr. Lombardo,
Yes.
Ms. McDermott. Yes. Mr. McGinley,
Yes.
Mr. Perry,
Yes.
Mr. Thornton,
Yes.
Mr. Urban.
Yes.
Mr. Willoughby.
Yes.
Ms. Radel.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Motion passes. Before we adjourn the meeting, I also just want to thank Mr. Sweats for stepping up to be the acting county manager these last few weeks. And I also want to thank him for his hopeful continued effort in helping with the transition. We appreciate you. Thank you, Mr. Sweats. We have nothing else. We have a motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions, opposed, meetings adjourned. Let's come back at 7:10 for the work session.
Yeah.
Recording stopped.
Yes. So you never know. They were the king's chair. Oh.
Turn your mics on, just make sure your lights are green. Your voice can. All like mics on. All right, it's 7. Where's Carl? Oh, there he is. Okay, sorry. I just looked over your spot. All right, 7:13, we'll call the work session to order. We already did the Pledge of Allegiance.
Recording in
Everyone wrote silence.
progress.
So we have a roll call, Ms. Lawrence?
Mr. Venus.
Present.
Mr. LaScavitch.
Here.
Mr. Lombardo.
Here.
Ms. McDermott. Here. Mr. McGinley.
Present.
Mr. Perry.
Here.
Mr. Thornton.
Here.
Mr. Urban.
Here.
Mr. Beloved.
Here.
Ms. Radel.
Here.
All present.
Do we have any additions or deletions?
Motion to adopt the agenda.
Second. I think Leanne beat you. Okay, sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the agenda is passed. Number 1, we have receive and discuss manager reports for May 2022. I will defer to County Manager Robertson.
Well, subject to your questions, I have went through it once, very briefly with Mr. Sweats. I would reserve the right to talk to you individually or collectively as we go through time about process in terms of how could we better serve you in terms of the information. A lot of details that I think are really, and everyone's kind of fighting to get information in, but that was my first pass at it in a short period of time. So I have nothing on this one subject to your questions, and Brian's ready to answer the questions.
Great, thank you. Mr. Schwartz?
Really nothing, just obviously the report's attached. If there's anything I can't answer, I will. If not, you can email myself or county manager and we'll get information for the next meeting.
Great, thank you both so much. Number 2, the discussion regarding ARP pre-applications. The only reason I put this on the agenda is to just have a little bit of a discussion about how we want to move forward, whether council members do want to move forward with a firm to take a look at these applications and vet them. But while I do think that maybe that should be something we think about putting that on the agenda, I do think that we should continue to move on this. So if members want to, council members want to send their top projects to us, and we could go through and try to put a list of the top ones. We received so many. So if we could get like a top list, that's up to you guys. Mr. Robertson?
Ma'am, that was when you mentioned that's the one I'm prepared to talk to. If that's okay with you.
Sure.
And the 10 minutes we had this afternoon between meetings gave a notional thought to Mr. Sweats on what newcomer, but some experience with this and others. And that's what you had before you. And I don't know, Brian, did they see it on the screen for those in audience land? I believe you supplied it to IT, but if not, I'll drive on. It will be on the. And I do not want to steal Brian's thunder, but we did spend some time in terms of trying to posture you, because I'm not commending in any stretch that you do anything now other than develop a process. And in that regards, as he'll walk through, there's a lot of money left out there, as I understand, close to $100 million, $98 million. The interest on that could be it is, and he did the math and I worked with him on that. So if we don't have a plan of execution, which we have some time to develop, there's certainly some prudent investments that I would ask you to consider. But if we don't know what your thoughts are in terms of not to the specific and not to the dollar, but in terms of tranches, if anything, spend 30 right now, develop the plan. And to do that, in my estimation, where I've seen it with some sense of accuracy, since no one in the world has ever done this before in the United States, and there are firms that specialize this. You apparently had some meetings on that. So to that, Mr. Sweats, would you walk them through what we developed very quickly?
Sure. So I'm going to just go through the PowerPoint. So the next page is really the legislation and funding summaries. That would be the next slide. for the people online. But it's basically just the summary that the state and local fiscal recovery funds came out. We started with the interim rule, we went to the final rule. We received both payments, so we received the whole 112.9 million. And just a reminder that funds would be obligated by the end of 2024, but the county has until 2026 to actually spend them. So we can start the project, we can have the contract signed till 2024 and still write a check in 2025 or 2026. That's the current final rule. We've heard nothing that's going to be amended, so that's what we're using right now. Next slide, please. So just quickly, some of the buckets we talked about, and again, it's kind of a generic term. There's broadband, there's lost revenue, and there's stormwater, wastewater projects. Our assumption was to defer to a specialist, and we'll talk about that a little later. But it's really the lost revenue we'll go over later as well. But we have some stormwater, wastewater projects that we already approved, and it's really to get on board of which bucket does a project fall in. Maybe of that 8 million, 7 million stormwater, wastewater, and $1 million's lost revenue. So really, it's until the projects are actually picked and invoices and contracts are done, it's really just our best guesstimate. So next slide. This is probably the most productive slide. It lists every single thing that we committed, the resolution number, everything you've voted on to date, including the last meeting with LCTA and Hazleton Public Transit. So funds committed is 16.5 million. Only spent 12,000 on some vaccination clinics and residents. Total says 112.9, again, estimated. We used and committed 16.5. So there's the bottom line of about 96.3, give or take, is available. Again, we could earn interest on these funds. So that's what we have sitting. We have more than that sitting in a bank account, but some of that is allocated. Next slide. This was one of the things that we talked about in the Luzerne County administration. We received 15 requests for proposals. Out of that, we interviewed 6 firms. Booth Management Consulting, BMC, was the administration selection. I think this was in front of council April timeframe, end of March, April. It was voted down, but it was under what I heard and what the firm heard and the public heard was that we're waiting on a manager. So I would like to move forward with that. They are a subject matter expert in grant administration and compliance auditing. I think we talked about not just today, not just 2026, but the 5 to 7 years after that. You know, not just the local firms, the U.S. Treasury, that there's going to be compliance auditing, there's going to be an audit of this money, and especially with the volume of the dollars. So that's really, we'd like to get that. If council can get that on the next voting meeting, that would be our suggestion. But again, it's council's meetings, but we can put together the work session and just change the date. We're not changing the firm. I talked to Mr. Robertson today about, are we starting from square one or moving forward? And we were under the assumption we're going to move forward, because that was one of the questions that the firm asked me when they were voted down last time. So next slide. This is just really quick math. And again, it's kind of high level. And so, lost investment opportunity and suggested path forward. And this is, it's always easy to Monday morning quarterback and go back. And if we did this 6 months ago, but it's really just so we can move forward. So we had 2 checking accounts, and I believe Mr. Scavage asked about this. We had 2, not 1. We were earning 0.04% interest. So we had $56 million that were earning 0.04% interest. So in half a year, that'd be approximately $11,000 on $56 million. So if this council, with the help of a consultant, said, hey, 30 million we're going to use next year, or 60 million we're going to use next year, we can invest this money. Administration can look at, is this a 3-month offering, a 6, a year? We can put out an RFP and work with firms to earn a much greater rate. So the other thing is purchasing power and investment opportunity. I think everybody knows with the inflation, even since then, not just the beginning of the year, money's sitting in our account, but we can't buy as much as we could have then. And then request to hold a special meeting. We really think if you can do something next week, and again, it's just kind of dropped on you today, so I don't expect an answer today. We really think there should be a meeting just on this. We want to move forward. We want to know what your thoughts are and what the parameters are, so we can work with the consulting firm and with some investments to move forward. And the other things on here are just that to appoint Booth as the ARP consultant, and roughly, because I didn't go through each one, there was about 175 original projects, and then there was probably 4 or 5 extra. And when we put the deadline together, it was just to get council a list. You did not have to be on the pre-application list. It was not, you're automatically approved if you're on the list. It was purely to the point of give council a list. So there has been some received after the deadline, so just kind of how we're gonna move forward. So those are really the things that we'd ask for when we do meet, even if it's not next week. How are we gonna move forward? What are your suggestions? Can we get the consultant at the next voting meeting? And what kind of dollar amount do we think we're not gonna use this year that we could invest and earn way more than 0.04% interest? And then the last slide is really just questions. Again, it's your process. We're trying to help with the process and move forward. So in the 10 minutes we spent today on it, you knew most of this information. Obviously you were here since January, but it was just kind of, we're losing opportunity. We need to move forward and we'd like to move forward together with you. So that's all I have.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure, Mr. McGinley.
And your funding for fiscal year 2022. Just so everybody realizes, the transportation authorities, both the LCTA and Hazleton Public Transit, those are monies that we put into the budget in place of our budget.
Right, so in prior years, they were paid in the general fund. During last year's budget, there was a motion made to move them to the reserve. That's how you have, not all of, but most of your $1 million reserve. Was that, and obviously this is only until 2024. So at any year, you can continue to pay them out of ARP funding. When the ARP funding is done, council would be required to pay them out of the general fund budget. There's no other place of money if we're going to pay these matches.
So you're looking at approximately $1 million that would have to be in the general fund budget in order to be able to supply that match that they have requested.
Yes, and it's whether that's in 2023 or 2025 is up to council as a whole.
I believe that's a really not a good budgetary procedure. I think there's some other ways we can approach that. The other thing that I'm concerned about, we've already passed some resolutions with some people getting money.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at some of those past resolutions. There are projects that are listed there that I don't know if they're eligible or not. And have we notified those people that the projects have to be eligible? Do the projects, who's going to check to see that they're eligible? How are we going to approach that? Because, if they spend the money, they're going to expect you to write a check.
Yeah, so really two parts of that. So one, when they were actually in here asking for the money, we said if it wasn't allowable, we try to do a substitute project or they'd have to return the money. I realized that returning the money is a long shot and a long process. Really, it's really to get the consultant on the front end. All we've really wrote checks out for is the $12,000. So even though we allocated $8 million, they haven't gotten 1 cent yet. So we want to get the consulting firm on board, make sure it's eligible. I think Mr. Thornton talked about it. We went through this and brought it to council as an insurance policy. We think we have expertise in finance matters. This is some grant administration, but knowing it's going to be audited, also knowing for liability purposes, we want a consultant on board. So we haven't spent any money on these yet. So there's still time to say, of this 8 million, 6 million is eligible and 2 million is not. The other thing that I wanted to talk about quickly is, there's always the talk about the 2020 lost revenue because we didn't finish the 2021 audit yet. So of that 8.9 million, there's about 4 million remaining. The IT projects and those elevator projects for the prison were out of lost revenue. So if 2 million was ineligible, we could take it out of lost revenue and still give it to them, or we would have to amend our match to be we're giving $6 million. But absolutely why we feel a firm should be involved. We made that case in April. And again, we waited on a manager and we are where we are. He's ready to move forward. I'm ready to move forward. So, and with council, not on our own. So.
I have a question.
Sure.
Mr. Robinson, I was generally in favor of bringing on that firm, BCM, but I was one of the ones, among others, that wanted to kind of hear your opinion, weigh in on such a big decision. So are you generally in favor of that?
So there's not a question in my mind, having 30 years of federal experience with not this per se, but 15. There's a food fight out across the nation right now because every county, every city of any substance has these same checks.
Right.
So even trying to get a contractor for a road or ordering a fire engine, rather than doing it right now, we need subject matter experts who can delve into, could you better move the money? And for that, what I think is a de minimis amount of money compared to $112 million that you'll never see again, I think. That subject one is, we're just not, and the country as a whole is not prepared to push forward on execution of these massive amounts of money. The prices are artificially high. We found in Colorado, some of the initial funds come in, and one, we couldn't find contractors. And I'm not saying, I just use roads because that's a good one that meets good approval, but price of concrete is nearly double in the last year. So I would also commend the council to have a strategy, and that's all we're looking for next week. Come in some recommendations, but a strategic plan. So rather than letting $96 million sit in a 0.04 accruing account, knowing that we have to get it committed and then obligated and then committed by a timeline, but start to draw even 6 months, 1 year, 1.5 years, and then Brian can take that strategically and start whittling it down. But you've seen that, and I believe him. I'm not saying we're going to get 2% either. That may be an overly optimistic, but it would be more than $11,000. And that was just for a 6-month time. So I think just commending that not only we give you a plan, but giving him and I the authority to say, let's strategically look at this and allow you the flexibility to invest where you can, and then have it ready to move as we deal with possible investors on that side. And that company is, I think, invaluable doing that.
That's a good idea, and I just want to know, because it's my field, that I work in, the 96 million that we currently have left that was given to us months ago and actually passed by the act of the last year. That 96 million is actually worth less than $90 million now.
Yes, thank you.
8.5% inflation that's going on. So what you thought you could buy with 96 million, you really only have about 90 million. So the time is of the essence, like you said.
One other thing, if you don't mind, ma'am, I don't want to, this is not about me, but I don't know the protocol yet. Other places that I have been, most of them, particularly when you're blessed with a larger county, and it was mentioned here, the number of universities and big banks. And I'd like to develop a cadre and reach out to some of our really smart people, investment bankers here, to do something good for the county. PhDs in economics, not only for this, but in terms of our bond processes, in terms of our investments, because I don't have a PhD in economics. I'm fairly good at some things. Brian doesn't either. But getting a wise body and starting to get a longer term strategic plan of how do we go about approaching some of this economic stuff. I don't know if we'll have it in place for this, certainly probably not, but this is a kind of a call out that if you want to serve your county and you hear us, talk to me, because I think we could do better with having some wiser people at no cost. I mean, this is a volunteer effort, but other places I've been, there are a lot of people jumping at trying to help. Right. Thank you, sir.
And one quick question, if this money has to be spent, projects spent by the end of 26, there's a lot of projects. There could be several that just didn't get them done. What do they return? We didn't give them the money yet, or we did, they give it back, or do we send it back to the state? How does that work?
I'm assuming it would go back, but again, we're not there yet. The intent is spent. Maybe they'll amend it, but right now it's not just committed, but all the funds are spent, including the interest rate.
And the last point I want to make, and a couple of us discussed this informally, that, maybe to, I don't know how to say it, to heighten the legitimacy of some of the requests, maybe we put a caveat on this money and require some kind of match by the recipient.
That has been done by other places, sir, that I've seen.
10% or 20% match or something.
Have some skin in the game.
Right, skin in the game. So that's something everybody could consider.
I agree with that 100%.
good idea.
Thank you. Anything else on this topic? If not, we'll have the discussion regarding the proposed road project. I just put this on here. Mr. Plush was here, but Mr. Swets, I think, could speak to it now, or if Mr. Robertson wants to add anything, but I was just thinking, just to keep moving on road projects. The Sweet Valley Road project, it was number 2 on the original list of the worst roads, I believe, and Mr. Swets might know better than I. And I don't think it's not a huge project. It's one of the more affordable projects. So do you want to speak to that?
Sure. So Mr. Plesh had, I think Mr. Lovich had asked for a list, and Mr. Plesh gave 3 roads. Sweet Valley was, by his estimate, 1.86 million. So of the 3, it was the least costly. Also, you know, as we talked before, we have 4 million, and we may want to leave some in reserve in case some projects aren't eligible from the other money we committed. So that, you know, that was the thought, that Sweet Valley would be a road that we can still get done this season without using all the money. The intent is that when we get into July, maybe not the first meeting, maybe the second budget meeting, we'll have the 2021 lost revenue number and can see what that is. But if we picked some of the bigger roads, if we picked a road that was 3 million or 3.5 million, and we ran into any kind of issues, or it was exactly 3.5, we pretty much would have spent the entire 2020 allocation. So Sweet Valley was number 2 on the list. That was done, I think, in 2020, and was a nominal cost compared to the other 2 roads. So that was the suggestion, but 1.8 million.
Would you guys be willing to see that like spec'd out for the next meeting, this road? Is that okay? Or does anybody have any other suggestions?
I would, yeah.
Just so we continuously, you know, keep roads on. Okay,
Madam Chair?
yeah.
Right, Oak Hill Road, Mountain Top, what's the status? I know we approved, was a grant, I believe. What's the status of that?
I honestly don't know that one off the top. I think that went through with Michelle Sparrish in the grant writing. So I'd actually have to follow up on that one. That one I don't know off the top of my head.
Because I'm getting a lot of calls. on the
Yeah,
road.
if you want to shoot an email to Mark, just to remind me, and I can follow up. Yep.
Question. With the roads, we talked about possibly turning them back over to the municipality to have them take care of it. Now, I don't know what that Sweet Valley Road, if that's enough that we would be doing to it, would they be willing to take it over?
Yeah, looking at this sheet, it's 3.1 miles. I don't know, just like last time, is it just, you know, is it milling? How deep of a, so until Mr. Plush provides that. But it is more than just a section. I think everyone knows there's parts where there's a county intersection of a city road and then a borough road, or a township road and then a city road. So if it is 3.1 contiguous miles and there's more, we have a better chance to turn it back than something where there's 3 municipalities involved. But I'd actually need to see what's being done for that 1.86, and that's what we did with the last one with Kirby. So I'd have Mr. Plush get that.
Great, thank you. Any other council members?
Yeah, just a quick update, since we're not talking about infrastructure. I spoke to County Engineer Larry Plush today regarding the county-owned bridge between Pittston and West Pittston. We recently passed as a body that to authorize that PennDOT approved inspection company to go in, inspect that bridge, and with the intent and hopes that it at least be reopened for light duty traffic. I asked Mr. Plush the progress on that today. He was in contact with them today, and they said they're scheduled together, and it's gonna happen soon, he told me, and he would forward that to council as soon as he hears when they're gonna be out there inspecting that bridge. But it's probably gonna happen later this month or early July.
Great, thank you. Before we move on to the report of the council committees, I really quickly just want to put into the record the new committees, the infrastructure committee, and then the other committee was the review committee to review like LRTAs and contracts and things like that before they get to council. So the infrastructure committee, the chair will be, and if anybody has an objection, let me know. Infrastructure, Mr. Thornton as chair, Mr. Lombardo as vice chair, myself and Mr. Lescavage. And then the review committee will be Mr. Venus as chair, Mr. Mitchell as vice chair, Ms. McDermott and Mr. McGinley. Is everybody okay with that, with it being serving on those committees? Okay, great. So now report of council committees. This is the first time we have this on the agenda for the new council members. We'll go through the list. If you don't have an update, just state that you don't have an update. Just kind of tell us if you have a meeting scheduled, if you recently had one, high level overview of what's going on with your committee. So we'll start with Act 13 Grant Committee, Mr. Thornton.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I did meet a few weeks ago with Mr. Swets. We discussed the Act 13 grant program. Just for everybody's edification here, that grant comes down from the state. Its funds are solely received from the Marcellus Shale fracking companies. They pay the state a certain amount of money, and the state redistributes that money out to all the counties. It's not an enormous amount of money every year, but it could be anywhere from 150 to 250,000 once a year. That money typically is alerting the county. I think it's first week of July, so that's coming up in about 3 weeks. And when we were notified of that, we'll move forward then with the process of receiving applications from the municipalities that wish to receive a small amount of that money. Again, that money is solely for the purpose of recreation, parks, things like that.
Thank you, Mr. Thornton. ABCs, Mr. Lombardo.
We did have a meeting last month and we did have a small round of appointments at one of our previous council meetings. I don't have another meeting scheduled as of yet. I don't believe we have very many applications in for any of the ABC committees. Just one. Okay. So obviously we're actively taking applications. I know Mr. Griffith had a concern during public comment about the airport board for the 44 airport, but we can't appoint anybody if we don't have any applications. So if anybody would like to apply for that board or any other board, please feel free to send them over and we'll be happy to take a look at them.
Thank you, Mr. Lombardo. Budget, Finance, and Audit, Mr. McGinley.
Well, we've had several meetings over the past 5 or 6 weeks. We've had the auditing firm at each of the meetings, and Mr. Swets has been part of that, and his staff that have been working on the budget. They have told us many times over that they will meet the deadline, and they expect the audit to be issued 2 weeks this Friday. And then they will meet with the council in July to review the audit and answer any questions. As of this afternoon, I had sent an email to Mr. Swets in regards to the audit, and there are some issues with the human services. A couple of the agencies there have to complete some work. So I will be in contact with Mr. Swets and the auditing firm to see where we stand and what has to be done so that we can meet that deadline of June 30th. So it's ongoing. Our committee has been very good. I think the updates from the accounting firm has been excellent. You really kept us up to date on, any of the issues that may be presented to them. So I hope that we meet the June 30th, and I hope that the issues with the human services we can rectify very quickly.
Great, thank you, Mr. McGinley. Legislative, Mr. Wolovich.
We have not met yet. I know Mr. Schnee was previously the chair. I just assumed the chairmanship of that. Do we know if we need a replacement for Mr. Schnee on that committee?
We'll put Mr. Mitchell, since he took his seat, we'll put Mr. Mitchell on that. You could
Want to
take,
consider if he'd like to be the chair too? I mean, if not, I'll gladly do it. I said, I want to give him.
I'll get back to you on that. We'll put him on the committee for sure, but I'll get back to you.
Yeah, sure. Other than that, no, we did not.
Thank you. Real estate, Ms. McDermott.
We had a meeting last month, nothing scheduled yet. We're waiting for the RFPs to come in for the historic property, which is due June 22nd.
Thank you. Strategic initiatives.
Okay, for strategic initiatives, we have not met. I'm looking forward to having a conversation with Mr. Robertson next week, so we can talk about some of his goals for the county, maybe some more strategic things he'd like to work on. I'm sure we'll be discussing that, and we'll be holding our next meeting first Wednesday in July.
First Wednesday in July. Thank you. County Code Review, Mr. Urban.
I know this has been a committee that's really kind of silent right now. Here, I'd like to probably schedule a meeting within the next 30 days. So available, but probably want to discuss this with Mr. Robertson as well, with the actual code personnel from a high level approach, maybe eliminate some of the duplication between the charter and some codes. Probably I think if Mr. Robertson introduces it to, it's automatically introduced versus we bring the council requirement for those. Because our admin code is an ordinance for all intents and purposes. How we run administration, but I think there's some things in there that need to come out that don't conform to the state statute, especially under the election law. I've looked at other home county charters in the past, and some of them say, hey, go directly to Title 25, which is the election code. It's hands off to their councils or their legislative bodies not to guide in that area unless they are the elections, have memberships. So there are some areas that I have some concerns with, but when I have my one-on-one.
Great, thank you, Mr. Urban. Number 5, reports of council-related committees, blighted property, Mr. Wolovich.
Okay, blighted property, I think I'm still the only sitting member. We need to reach out to planning and redevelopment, see who their assignments are for that committee. Also, Randy, I think we need to appoint somebody, and still be a citizen.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wolovich. County cares, that's myself. We are a couple members short. But I would like to try to schedule a meeting for July to hopefully have a fall project in the works this summer, start on that. But like Mr. Lombardo said, if anybody wants to apply or you know anybody who wants to apply, there are spots open on the County Cares Commission. Shameless plug, it's a great commission. We do some great things. It really helps the community. So we need members there. Riverfront Parks Committee, Mr. Wiscavige.
Nothing new there, but I will start acting on that. I think good ideas, things to do there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wiscavige. Also, Ms. Lawrence just said the Planning Commission is also asking, they need members as well. So apply, tell your friends, apply. Thank you. Public comment. Mr. Griffin.
Greg Griffin, Citizens Blight Committee, Swarsville. Mr. Robertson, welcome. $98 million apparently that's left from the ARP money. I'm seeing some patterns here. Stormwater, Hazleton, Land Banks, Sanitary Authority, Corrections, BMC, Booth Management Consulting. I don't know what that's going to cost if we hire them. Greg Wolovich, he was in the basements with us. We helped insulate seniors' basements. There's a lot of people hurting, and so the patterns I'm seeing, and it's early yet, because we have a lot of money. But I want council to put away a little bit of the money for the widows who worked their entire lives in the garment factories that Greg met. He was in the basement. He crawled under a trailer. Whose husbands died as coal miners. Put away a little bit of this money for the people, because there's going to be an outcry if the widows are not taken care of. Hot water heaters, furnaces, much like the CEO. Now, there's the Commission on Economic Opportunity. It's a 2-year waiting list if your furnace goes in January. So this ARP money that we have started at $114 million. Mr. Thornton says inflation, whatever. We have to put away a little bit for the citizens who are struggling. Now, I can pay for my furnace and hot water heater. I'm sure, oh, you can. We have to feel the people's pain. Greg was there. He got the insulation on him and everything. He had the mask, but still, he got it in his eyes. But he was there. He saw, sometimes these basements we go in, we can look outside, and these poor ladies and senior citizens are freezing. We cannot forget them with the ARP money. The district attorney, he's going to be coming to you for some cash, more money. There hasn't been a district attorney's task force team in any schools on this fentanyl issue in 3 years. Now, he did visit the school in December. Affordable housing, the crumbling infrastructure, these widows and senior citizens, the roofs are leaking. Mayor Brown put $7,500 away for every homeowner who qualified for a something new in their house, a roof. So we can do that. We can put some money away. It's early yet. I like the temporary interest, get some interest from this money, but let's not forget about the people, because I'm seeing a pattern here.
Thank you.
It's going to a lot of high people.
Thank
We're
you,
watching.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Mr. Newman?
Yeah, thank you. My issue is roads. Hasn't been brought up, so I figured I might as well say something. I'm glad to hear that one of the roads on the list is being, I guess the contract will be let on it, Sweet Valley, and it is needed. I read the classifieds every morning, both newspapers, JV and Times Leader. JV for Scranton Times Junior Varsity. You'll learn that, Mr. Robertson, what that means. There's a lot of contracts being let for road improvements, repaving, a lot of different contracts being let for general contracts because of the money that's available. And I think Mr. Robertson stole my notes when he said there's a food fight out there for contractors. And I'm seeing it every morning in the newspaper. There's a lot of municipalities have money to spend and they're looking for people to do the work. And when it comes to roads, we only have a couple batch plants in this area. And if they get at capacity and you're not on the list, roads aren't going to get paved. And if these roads that need to be paved, then it is an issue, folks. You know, it's going to be, hey, county council, you didn't get it done. So emphasizing what Mr. Robertson said, emphasizing what Brian Sweat said, let's get moving. Let's get moving. Let's start getting the contracts out there so we can get the contractors to do the roads. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. Mr. Rabo?
Thank you. With regards to what was said about the infrastructure funding and the ARP money, I just want to remind all council and Mr. Robertson that you might want to check in with our state legislators and the delegation from our county, because last time I checked, I do believe there's $5.5 billion sitting in an account from the state's portion of the ARP money that they haven't allocated. Now, I know they put some money in a rainy day fund because last time I checked, there was only enough in their rainy day fund for like 20 days in case of an emergency. So, and I do know that out of the $6 billion that the state got, 250 million of that was allocated in last year's state budget for stormwater projects. So I just want to know, what did the county, I know that acting manager Procomo, I said this at the council meeting last year, no one ever applied for it out of that 250 million to the state. So I hope, Mr. Robertson, you could reach out to our state delegation, legislators, maybe to find out, first of all, how much is left of that $250 million. And also if our county can apply, or also the municipalities within our county can apply for that funding and what kind of a match would be required. That's one idea. So that being said, I want to also relay that the IRS tax migration report came out for this year. And once again, Pennsylvania was 31st in population change, losing 5,000 people, 35th in wealth, losing 1.2 billion in adjusted gross income from 2019 to 2020, according to an analysis by Wirecuts. So, and the reason our state actually has a chance is because New York and New Jersey and Maryland are not really doing anything to attract. So we have an opportunity. Now, I think, Madam Chair and Mr. Vice Chair, you also campaigned I remember exclusively on the fact that we're losing our talented people to other states. I think that if this report doesn't scream out that we need to do something as a county and as a state, I don't know what does. And also, if you read the State Independent Fiscal Office's report, which came out last week, it's even more dire. So I hope this council can reach out, and especially our legislative committee, along with our state legislators, to do something about this. Because as I said to council many years, and Mr. Robertson, I'll leave you with this, economic development without quality of life is meaningless. So they go hand in hand. Economic development and quality of life go hand in hand. I leave you with that. Thank you very
Mr.
much.
Rabel. Any other members of the public? Hearing none, do we have a
Yes.
motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Oh, Mr. Griffith,
Yes.
go.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, a little slow on my mute button. Thank you. I just have one quick thing for the council to take a look at. If anybody drives by the Luzerne County Juvenile Center, the one that we recently sold in November of 2020, that building is, there's weeds growing. It's very, very unsightly. The person who bought that promised us as council that they were going to renovate that building and make it a fabulous structure. And I understand the economic situation currently is not probably conducive to doing that because of the cost of inflation and everything that we have going on right at the moment. But I think maybe if we could reach out to the person who purchased that, Mr. Castillo, and ask him if he could at least clean it up a little bit so it's not quite as unsightly. I think that would be very helpful, and possibly get a progress report as to what his initial start plans are for that building. So we would have some kind of idea. I mean, he did buy the property fairly inexpensively. He got, he was awarded the bid, and we gave it to him in good faith that he was going to fix it up. So if council as a whole, or even Ms. McDermott is the real estate committee chair, could reach out and just get a progress report, I think that would be very helpful for people to drive by there wondering just what's happening with that structure.
Thank
The
you,
other,
Mr. Griffith. Oh, sorry.
the
go
only
ahead.
other
Ms.
thing-
McDermott
the
has
o-
an update on that, so go ahead. You
Oh,
finish,
okay.
and then she'll keep.
Okay, so and the other point that I have is on the ARP funding for the county. I would just jump on what Mr. Griffin said as well. I just think that we need to be very careful that we don't pass out this money sort of like chiclets for people. I think what we need to do is make sure that we take care of county stuff first. County infrastructure is very, very bad. I mean, roads in general. I think we should take care of our stuff first, and then if we have an abundance afterwards, then pass it out to the people that are in need for that. But we need to take care of the county first. We're probably, as Mr. Robertson said, we'll never see this kind of money ever again. And so we need to take care of what we need to take care of in the county first. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Griffith. Go ahead, Ms. McDermott.
Okay, just to update you, the juvenile detention center did not sell yet. There's a problem with the sewer line, and that has to be rerouted. So we are still in negotiations with that.
Thank you. Anything else from any other members of the public? Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions, opposed. Have a great night, guys. Meeting adjourned.
2 hours. No, I want to go somewhere. Yeah.